Hey everyone, welcome to another lesson. In this one, we're going to talk about while loops, another important concept which is heavily used in Python to process information and loop through information. So previously, we've talked about for loops. Essentially, a for loop is something that, a loop that goes through a list and does something over and over to a list, right? So a while loop is a little bit different. So the difference with the while loop, and this is how it actually is worded, the while keyword is right here, is that it's going to run over and over until a condition is true. All right. Now, again, if you think about it, a for loop is going to run through a list and do something over and over to that list. All right. Until we, again, like run a command over and over to each item of the list, right? But the while loop essentially just runs something over and over until a condition is true or false, however you frame it, really. And this is heavily used in Python, and you see this all over the place, essentially, when you program. And one of the things the reason I wanted to introduce while loop in this section is that we can actually put it to practice. So let's go back to our reworks world and to the practice that we did in the previous video. So we had a for loop here, and we can actually turn this into a while loop very, very simply. And it could, again, it's just a different way of wording it, really, right? But it's a good way to put this into practice. Now, I want you to think about this. How can you actually turn this into a while loop? So the first thing you want to do is you want to keep track of the number of jumps. All right. So again, we have a jump function here. So we want to keep track of the number of jumps. So I'm just going to define a new function. I'm just going to call this a number of jumps. And we're going to start with 6. And if you remember, we did the same thing when we had the range here, right? So we're going to start with 6. And what we're going to do is we're going to say while number of jumps is bigger than 0, you're going to jump. So this basically replaces what we just did here. But also another thing that we got to do is we got to make sure that we take the number out each time we jump, right? So we're just going to say number of jumps equals or minus equals 1. So basically what is happening here is that when we use a while loop, we're keeping track of the jumps in the beginning. So we know we're gonna jump like this many times, right? 6 times. And then we're gonna say while this number is bigger than 0, you're gonna keep jumping, and then you're gonna take 1 out of the function, out of the variable here. And just like that, we replace this for loop with this while loop. And again, they do the same thing in this case, but while loops are used for different things. While loops are used for real true loops, in a sense that you want to make sure that if you want to check for something over and over in a program, that's when you use a while loop. And that's a very, very important thing that you're going to be heavily using. But again, a for loop is just for checking items in a list, right? So if I get this out of here, and if you run this, we're going to get the same thing, right? So again, it's going to run this number, and it's going to keep going until it takes 1 out each time. And it's eventually when it runs to the end, there you go. Let's just wait for it to do that. And then eventually when it runs to the end, it's not going to have the number of jumps are going to be 0. So 0 is not bigger than 0. It's going to be equal 0, right? So eventually that's when it actually stops. So that is the condition of the while, right? There you go. So again, pretty much same thing as this in this case, but we just use the while. And this is how you actually put the while into the use, essentially. It's a loop that runs continuously based on a condition. And as long as that condition is true or false based on how you define it, this condition or this loop or this command inside the while loop continuously repeats. Again, like we got the condition, and as long as this condition is true, this command runs over and over and over again in the program. So that's pretty much it for the while loops, guys. Let me know if you have any questions, and we're going to put this to practice and you're going to see it more in action. So, you're going to be able to understand it a little bit better, because while loops are, again, very important and they're very useful when you're designing algorithms and things like that. And that's something we will get to as well in this section. And I will show you exactly how can you use while loops for check for things over and over to solve a problem. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.